I'm Mia, and I'm 25 now. I work as a software developer in Seattle, and let me tell you, it's a world away from where I grew up. My journey to independence has been hard-fought, but it all began with me escaping the clutches of my mother's control. To understand where I am now, you need to know where I came from. I grew up in a small town near Portland, living under the oppressive rule of my mother, Eleanor. My childhood was anything but ordinary. From the day I could remember, my mother controlled every aspect of my life. There were no allowances, no sleepovers with friends, and certainly no room for rebellion. If I did something she deemed wrong, the punishment was severe. Sometimes it was no dinner, other times it was losing access to things I loved. The freedom I saw other kids enjoying was a distant dream for me. Even though I excelled in school, Mother was always there, pushing me in directions she thought best. She chose which college I should attend, insisting it was the best fit for my future, despite my own preferences. I wanted to study in a vibrant city, but she insisted on a smaller college closer to home. It felt like she was determined to keep me under her thumb, no matter what. But college was where I first glimpsed the possibility of freedom. I managed to make some decisions on my own, and after graduation, I seized the chance to move to Seattle. I landed a job at a prominent tech company, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally living for myself. I found a cozy apartment in a building not far from the city center. It was small, but it was mine, and it felt like a fortress of independence. Life in Seattle was an exhilarating change. I reveled in the little things, walking to work, choosing my own groceries, and setting my own schedule. The first few months were blissfully normal, but I started noticing little things that seemed out of place. Strange phone calls, odd messages, nothing concrete, but it unsettled me. I pushed it aside, chalking it up to paranoia from my overly controlled past. Then one evening, my neighbor, Mr. Carter, knocked on my door. He's a graphic designer and a bit older than me, with a kind demeanor and a lean physique. "Mia, can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of concern. "Sure, Mr. Carter. What's up?" I replied, trying to hide my nervousness. He looked worried. "I just saw someone acting suspiciously around your apartment. I thought you should know. They might be trying to get inside." My heart raced. I hadn't noticed anything unusual myself, but the thought of an intruder made my stomach drop. "Are you sure? I mean, it could be someone just passing by." "I'm positive." "I thought you should check it out," he said firmly. My mind spun as I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside. Everything seemed in place, but my anxiety was through the roof. Just as I was about to relax, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A purse that definitely wasn't mine. It was a sleek, designer piece, and it looked out of place. I was about to call the police when I noticed a note inside the purse. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was a message from my mother. "I'm sorry, Mia. I had to come. I've been watching you. I needed to know if you were okay." My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe it. My mother, Eleanor, was in my apartment. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. How had she found me? The purse had been a gift from her, one of many over the years. I hadn't thought much of it, but now I realized it had a hidden tracking device. She'd been monitoring my every move. I turned to Mr. Carter, who had followed me into the apartment. "My mother, she's been tracking me. She must have put a device in this purse. I can't believe she'd invade my privacy like this." Mr. Carter's face was filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Mia. That's a huge invasion of privacy.
You don't deserve that."
"I need to confront her," I said, my voice shaking. "She has no right to do this." I knew I had to act fast. The next steps were crucial. This was more than just a breach of trust. It was the moment I had to decide if I would let my mother's control continue, or if I would take a stand for my own life. As I made plans to confront her, a mixture of fear and determination filled me. I knew that facing her would be painful, but it was a necessary step in breaking free from her shadow. The freedom I had so eagerly embraced in Seattle now seemed to be at risk, and I needed to take control of my life once and for all. The discovery of my mother's hidden tracking device left me reeling. I couldn't believe Eleanor had crossed such a line. My life in Seattle was supposed to be my escape, my chance to breathe freely away from her overbearing control. But her presence was a chilling reminder that I was still tied to her. The next day, I took a deep breath and made my way to the address listed for her. She was staying in a small, rundown apartment not far from where I had grown up. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough for her. As I walked up to her door, my heart pounded. I knocked, and after a long moment, she opened it. "Mia," she said, her voice betraying a mix of surprise and guilt. "I wasn't expecting you." I stepped inside, my anger barely contained. "You weren't expecting me? You've been tracking me with a hidden device, and you're surprised." Her face reddened. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. I didn't mean to invade my privacy." I cut her off, my voice shaking. "You've been following my every move, Mom. That's not just about safety. It's control. You never let me be free." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but her defensive stance remained. "I've done it all for you. I was only trying to keep you close, to help you." "Help me?" I nearly shouted. "By suffocating me? By deciding everything for me? I'm 25, Mom. I'm an adult. I need to live my own life." Her tears spilled over. "I'm sorry, Mia. I didn't know how to let go. I've made mistakes, but I didn't know how to fix them." I stared at her, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. "You're not just apologizing for tracking me. You need to understand how deep your control has gone." It was then that she revealed something I hadn't expected. "I've been struggling financially. I wanted to ask you for help, but I didn't know how." The confession hit me like a punch to the gut. "You were going to ask me for money? After spying on me?" Eleanor nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been in debt, spending more than I should have. I thought maybe if I kept an eye on you, I could find a way to fix things." I felt a cold rage building inside me. "You've been spying on me to figure out how to get money from me? That's despicable. You've manipulated and controlled me for years, and now you want to use your intrusion to solve your problems." She tried to reach out to me, her hands trembling. "Mia, please. I didn't mean for things to get this way. I'm sorry." Her words felt hollow. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I can't keep letting you control my life, even from a distance." Leaving her apartment, I was overwhelmed with a mixture of sadness and determination. I realized that the only way to reclaim my life was to sever all ties with her. It wasn't just about the tracking device or the money. It was about breaking free from years of emotional manipulation. Back at my apartment, I immediately started making changes. I got a new phone and set up additional security measures to prevent any more breaches of my privacy. I began looking for a new place to live, one that would be as far from her as possible. I also contacted a lawyer to begin the legal process of separating my family register from her. Each step was filled with a mix of relief and heartache. I had been so desperate for freedom, but now that it was within my grasp, the cost was more than I had anticipated. It wasn't just about moving on from my mother's control, it was about rebuilding my sense of self and autonomy. As I started packing up my things and preparing for the move, Mr. Carter was a surprising source of support. He offered to help with the logistics and provided a listening ear during the tough days. We spent more time together, and his kindness became a small comfort amidst the chaos. But the battle wasn't over. The more I learned about the extent of my mother's manipulation, the more I realized how deep her influence had run. Her actions had not only impacted my personal life, but also the way I viewed relationships and trust. The confrontation with Eleanor was only the beginning. I was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery and healing, and while it was daunting, it was also necessary. The struggle for my independence had only just begun, and I knew that the road ahead would be challenging. The days following my confrontation with Eleanor were a blur of activity and emotions. I moved into a new apartment, far from the small town near Portland where I had grown up. My new place was a fresh start, a place where I could finally feel like I had control over my own life. But even as I settled into my new surroundings, the weight of everything that had happened still lingered. The new apartment was modern, with big windows that let in lots of light. It was different from the cramped spaces I had lived in before, and I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. The unpacking process was therapeutic, giving me a chance to reflect on how far I had come. But as I went through my belongings, I was reminded of the way Eleanor had intruded into every corner of my life. The legal separation from my mother was a significant step. It was both freeing and painful, knowing that this was the final cut in our complicated relationship. The lawyer assured me that it was a standard procedure, but it felt like a definitive end to a chapter one had struggled to close for years. During this time, Mr. Carter was a constant presence. He had been incredibly supportive, helping me with a move and offering a shoulder to lean on. We'd spend evenings talking about everything and nothing, his calm demeanor providing a welcome contrast to the chaos I had been through. Our conversations were a reminder that not everyone in my life was trying to control me. One evening, as we sat in my new apartment, Mr. Carter broached a topic I had been avoiding. "You've been through a lot lately," he said gently. "How are you holding up?" I looked around the room, my gaze landing on the empty spaces where my old life used to be. It's been a whirlwind. I feel like I'm finally starting to breathe again, but it's also hard to let go of everything that happened. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a lot to process, but you're doing really well. This new place, the changes, you're taking control of your life." I appreciated his words. It was a relief to talk to someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me or control my decisions. Mr. Carter's support was more than I had expected, and it helped me see that there could be a positive side to all this upheaval. As weeks passed, I began to establish a routine in my new apartment. I started working on personal projects I had neglected for years, things that made me happy and allowed me to express myself. I also began to slowly reconnect with friends I had lost touch with, finding comfort in their support and understanding. Despite these positive steps, I couldn't completely escape the shadow of my past. I would occasionally receive messages from Eleanor, pleading for forgiveness or asking for updates on my life. Each time, I felt a pang of guilt but knew that responding would only drag me back into the turmoil I had tried so hard to escape. One day, as I was preparing dinner, Mr. Carter came over to help. We were talking about my new job when he suddenly asked, "Do you ever think about what's next for you? Beyond just getting away from everything?" I paused, considering his question. "I'm still figuring that out. I've been so focused on just getting away from my mother and her control that I haven't really thought about what I want my life to look like now." He smiled gently. "It might be worth thinking about what you want for yourself, not just what you want to escape from. You've made such a big step. What's your vision for your future?" His words struck a chord with me. I realized that while I had been focused on escaping my past, I hadn't spent much time considering what I wanted moving forward. The idea of creating a future based on my own desires was both exhilarating and daunting. That evening, as I sat alone in my new apartment, I began to dream about the future. I thought about the kind of life I wanted to build, not just the absence of my mother's influence, but a positive direction for myself. It was a new kind of freedom, one that came with its own set of challenges but also with the promise of growth and self-discovery. I was starting to understand that reclaiming my life meant more than just breaking away from my mother's control. It was about building something new and meaningful for myself. And while the journey was far from over, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I hadn't felt in years. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel a cautious optimism. My new apartment was starting to feel like home, and my routine was finally settling into place. I had been focusing on personal growth and rebuilding connections, but there was still one thing left unsettled: the final confrontation with Eleanor. One afternoon, as I was enjoying a quiet moment with a cup of coffee, I received another message from Eleanor. It was similar to the others, pleas for reconciliation and hints about her financial troubles. I stared at the message, a mixture of anger and sadness bubbling up inside me. It was clear she was still trying to reach out, but I had made up my mind. I couldn't let her back into my life. Mr. Carter had become more than just a supportive neighbor. He was now a true friend. Our conversations had become a regular part of my life, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't thought possible. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together in my apartment, I decided it was time to share my final thoughts about my mother. "I got another message from Eleanor today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She's still reaching out, asking for money, and saying she's sorry. I don't know what to do. Mr. Carter looked up from the stove, concern etched on his face. You've already done so much to protect yourself. Maybe it's time to consider what's best for your own well-being. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension.
I've been thinking about that.
I know I need to let go completely, but it's hard to ignore that part of me still feels responsible. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder. It's natural to feel that way, but remember, you've done everything you could. Sometimes, letting go is the hardest but most necessary step. The next day, I made a decision. I drafted a final letter to Eleanor, laying out my boundaries clearly. I stated that I would no longer respond to her messages and that any attempts to contact me would be ignored. It was a firm but respectful goodbye, and I hoped it would provide the closure I needed. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. It was a formal end to a turbulent chapter of my life, but it was also a declaration of my intent to move forward without the weight of the past dragging me down. A few days later, I had another heart-to-heart with Mr. Carter. We were sitting in the park, enjoying the crisp autumn air. He was quietly observing the changing leaves when he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You've been through so much, Mia. I'm really proud of how far you've come. But I've also noticed something. There's a light in you now that wasn't there before. You seem more at peace. I looked at him, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you. It's been a journey, but I think I'm starting to find my way. I'm learning to focus on what I want, not just what I've escaped from. Mr. Carter smiled, his eyes reflecting genuine warmth. It's great to see you like this. And I'm here for you, whatever you need. The conversation lingered with me long after we said our goodbyes. I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. For the first time in years, I was beginning to envision a future that was truly mine, one built on my own dreams and aspirations. As the year drew to a close, I took time to reflect on the changes I had made. My life was still a work in progress, but I was no longer defined by my past or my mother's control. I was learning to make decisions for myself and to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, while watching the city lights from my apartment window, I thought about everything I had been through. It was a strange mix of pride and relief to know that I had come out stronger on the other side. There was still uncertainty, but there was also the promise of new beginnings. In the end, it wasn't just about breaking free from my mother's influence. It was about finding my own path and having the courage to walk it. And as I looked forward to whatever the future held, I felt a sense of peace knowing that, for the first time in a long time, I was truly in control of my own life.